Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for those of you who are in Europe. This is Scott Felton with QUBEdocs. I'm just getting started with our demo this morning. We will be showing you a quick overview of QUBEdocs as well as some new features that we're really quite excited about, and specifically a brand new module for log file search and analysis. So with no further ado, let's get started. I think you can see my home screen here. Looks like I'm sharing. The question for you at the end of the presentation is, can you figure out where this photograph was taken? Now, some of you, I'm sure, are probably going to have a pretty good idea of where it's at already, but hold your answers until the end, and we'll see who kind of wins the contest. So let's get started. So QUBEdocs, many of you on the call have kind of known and loved QUBEdocs for quite some time. Personally, I've been around QUBEdocs since version 1, and I've worked with it for years, and I've really enjoyed seeing it grow. The product itself has been around for over 10 years, and it's been in the market now for over 6 years. And when it was first created, it was really created for the purpose of documenting TM1 models. Not just documenting them, but automatically documenting every object, as well as all the relationships between every object. And soon after that, search was added, as well as comparisons. So that documentation was extremely useful. But what was even more useful is being able to search that entire set of documentation and return Google-like search results. When we started doing comparisons, being able to see the difference between what was documented last week and what was documented this week, we kind of stumbled upon a killer feature, which was change awareness in TM1 documentation. And in the last year, we have modernized the product and put the product in the cloud. And so now we have two options. We have both local as well as cloud. And having QUBEdocs as a multi-tenant service in the cloud has really started to transform the way we think about it. So any of you who may have seen my demonstration in the past will know that I start my demonstrations pretty much all the same way. But I'm now starting to talk about QUBEdocs in a more collaborative way. I guess you'd maybe say even a more modern way, where we're really quite keen to understand how you use QUBEdocs and how documentation and working with, designing and developing and supporting your models, what could help, basically. So in today's presentation, what we're going to cover is 3 new features. These are all being released on the QUBEdocs cloud, and with our ability to do much faster design and development on our end, we're expecting to have new features coming on a pretty regular basis now. So we'll be covering log file analysis, our new module. I'll be showing you some new ways to use diagrams in QUBEdocs, and we'll have a short discussion about API and where we're going with it. But as I mentioned, I'm really quite keen to hear your thoughts about what we can do in QUBEdocs to make it more useful for you. And so one of the conversations I've been having quite a bit with consultants and clients around the world is it would be great if we had alerting in QUBEdocs, since we know what changed from last week to this week, and we also know what changed possibly from our cloud environment. We'd like to know and get notified of that somehow, possibly through email or some sort of a messaging service. And I put a little circle in here for what would you like to see in QUBEdocs. One of the other big things that we're really trying to pay attention to, not just in the marketplace, but also within QUBEdocs, is that it's not always necessary for a software company to build its own software when there's a really great piece of software, oftentimes open source, that's already on the market. And so one of the things we have been really trying to focus on is to bring about new functionality through integrations with existing best practices functionality. So just like we can integrate via TM1's REST API, we are also quite interested in understanding how we might be able to deliver more value by integrating with other services like GitHub or Box.com or Zendesk. So we'd be interested if there are particular integrations that your team or your consultancy focuses on heavily. So just a quick review for anyone who may have joined once I've already gotten started here. There is QUBEdocs has been around for about 10 years, and in the last couple of years we've really modernized the product. We put it in the cloud, and now we're offering features on a pretty regular basis. So today we'll talk about log file analysis, custom diagrams, and API. So a real quick tour of QUBEdocs for those of you who may not have seen it in the past. QUBEdocs is essentially as-built documentation. We look at every object and we compare every object to every other object, and we understand the relationships and build you rich contextual and dynamic diagrams for you to be able to browse and understand how your model hangs together. We can also, because we use snapshotting technology, we can compare one snapshot to the next, so we can tell you what happened last week as compared to this week. We can tell you the difference between on-premise and cloud. We can tell you the files that are changed or different or deleted or added from the development environment to the test environment to the production environment. We support full text search. We do a number of different reporting concepts around understanding how the model hangs together, as well as what rights each user has and each group has. We focus really heavily on in-context answers, and we're moving more and more towards looking for different use cases for QUBEdocs. And one of the most recent ones that we've added in the last year or two has been the ability to leverage change management to help you plan your deployments. So with no further ado, I'm going to switch over and start showing you the product. So the first thing I try to really make a big deal about whenever I'm in any of my presentations is just try to remember that it's QUBEdocs with a Q. And that will help you get right up to kind of our launching pad for anything related to QUBEdocs. So just type in QUBEdocs with a Q and you'll be right up at our website. From our website, what you'll notice is that you can start a trial with Try It Now. You can schedule a meeting for a live demo if maybe someone on your team might want to see a repeat of this particular demo. And you can also log right into the cloud instance, which is what I'll do from here. So you can see that I've started my login, and I'm going to log into my demo account. Now, once I log into my demo account, I'm just going to orient you to the screen really quickly here. So I am in the plan -enterprise, so that's my customer. When I come to the home page, all of my models are going to be in the same spot. So each of these tiles represents a connection to a specific model. Most of what we'll be looking at this morning will be in our QD dev and prod models, and we'll also be looking at some log file analysis of the MyBI model. All of my snapshots that I've taken to date are all going to be stored here, and you can easily manage them or download them as needed. And we mentioned we're going to have some log file conversations today. You can see one of my log files is even uploaded right here. And at any time I can delete them or manage them as needed. And any users in my account will be handled here. So as you can see, we really have tried to go a long way towards making our documentation solution simple and easy enough that you don't need documentation to learn how to use our documentation solution. Probably a bad joke, but I think it's funny. Anyways, so let's start off with QD prod. So one of the first things I wanted to do in this presentation, just for anyone who's new and hasn't seen QUBEdocs before, is I'm going to go through most of the tool in about 5 to 7 minutes. So I'm going to move pretty quickly, and I just want to let you know that most of the presentation today is going to be focused on log file analysis. So if anybody wants to dig a little deeper into the main area of QUBEdocs, I'm happy to do so. We can schedule a follow-up time. So here you can see when you log into QUBEdocs, the first thing you see is the model homepage. And so you're going to see how many cubes are in your models, how many dimensions, processes, and chores. At any time, we can always turn on control objects up here at the top. And then you'll notice that I can now see all of my cubes, dimensions, processes, and chores. One of the other things that we can do is when we're looking at our first diagram here, when we're at the top level, we can adjust the way we see our model. So you might have a couple of hundred cubes in your model, and you may want to look at a view of your model without a few of those cubes in it. So what we've added is a concept called dynamic diagrams. And here I might want to take a look at this particular model without Z dates in it, and possibly I also want to remove the assumptions of the KPI and the PL and the PL detail cube. So I just want to see a model that looks like this. And as far as the connections, I want to see all of the connections highlighted with arrows and different colored arrows. So I've got it set up. I can go ahead and refresh my model. And here you can see this is the relationship if I'm just looking at these without the model without these cubes in it. I can easily take a look at the model exactly the opposite of that by refreshing here. And I can say, you know what, I still don't want to see that PL detail, and refresh it again. Now I have the diagram just the way I like it. I can go ahead and click Save that diagram, and I can give it a little name. And then I can say Save. And here now I have in my drop down for further use, I should have summary flows, and it should say demo test. There it is. And you can see I can get right back to that model anytime I like. Now, one of the other things that I really like to demonstrate when I show people QUBEdocs for the first time is how easy it is to go from the top of the model all the way down to the details. So imagine that you're taking a look at your model. Maybe it's a model you've only seen for the first time, and you just want to understand a little bit about how it hangs together. Well, here in our model, we can see that the PL cube is really central to the model. So I can drill into the PL cube just by clicking it. And one of the things that you'll notice right away is that the PL cube is now in the center of the model, and you get to see how the entire model hangs together specific to the PL cube. I can see all my dimensions. I can see all my rules. I can see the text of my rules, all the processes, where they come from and go to. And I can even see all of the views, the cube views in my particular instance here. Now, one of the things when we're looking at a model, and we were looking at it from the PL standpoint, you'll notice you can start to see where the data flows come into the model. So in this particular view, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some different diagram views. And so I'm going to take a look at the process flows. And here you can see the TI processes. The ETL flow starts to show up on the diagram. And we can see that the ODBC connection is flowing through that. So let's say we might want to look at all of the rule and process flows together. We have a view for that. Let's say we want to follow that ETL flow upstream. I can click on that TI process. Now we start to see some data flowing into metadata updates, and we can follow that TI process back all the way to the ODBC connection. We can review the TI process itself, and we can look at the data source query. So just a quick review, we went from the top of the model up here, looking at our entire model. We clicked into a cube. We followed the data source back. We looked at the rule and processes. went back to looking at the process itself. We reviewed the process diagram and the data source query. So just in a couple of clicks, you were able to move all the way from the top of the model all the way down through to the bottom most granular level of the model. You can do that for literally any object or literally any piece of code in your model. For instance, I may want to understand a little bit more about that FMIS process. I can just type FMIS right in my search window, and here you can see I have my search results come up with 8 processes, 2 chores, and 1 application group. And here are the processes here. This is the process that contains it in the name, and here are all the lines that contain FMIS highlighted in the code. It's a very handy search result screen. We also have an advanced search result that you can build complex queries. For instance, the characters to avoid in a process name. And when I do that, you'll get an expression editor that you can reuse for your own use. And you can save those queries anytime the same way we saved our views, and they'll show up in your navigator. So one of the great things about QUBEdocs is that it shows you everything, including cubes, including dimensions, including processes, and including chores. And we even have a knowledge base where you can link in external documents. We have a business glossary where you get to add your own definition to these objects, so you can describe in business terms what the account dimension is all about. So that's a useful tool for your business users as well as your technical users. And we have a technical glossary, so if you ever have a question about what one of the functions does, it's right there at your fingertips. We have some more analysis features that I'm not going to go into at length. Cube and dimension analysis, you can build a dynamic matrix. We can show you the users and the rights for the user and group rights for the different users and groups against which objects. I'm going to show you a real quick look at change analysis. So if I want to understand, for instance, what changed between production from last week to this week, I can just choose my 2 snapshots and click compare. And here you can see I get a really nice overview diagram that shows me that I've had a few processes changed and a few cubes changed. And so I only have 1% change in the cubes. I can see what's changed. I can see nothing has been added, nothing has been omitted, but there has been something modified. It's the KPI cube. And once I get here, I'll see any changes on that timeline, and then I can expand out that KPI cube in order to see those changes. Anything in red has been deleted, anything in orange, yellow has been changed, and anything in green would have been added. We can do comparisons across many different vectors, so you'll notice that I could actually even compare QDprod to SmartCo. And when I do this comparison, these are completely different models, and so you'll see a ton of change across them. This is the way that I demonstrate the various areas where we track changes. So here in the cubes, you'll notice that obviously everything is different. But if I just go to a common cube that we have between the 2 models, like the revenue cube, you'll notice that these are all the areas where we track changes. Across properties, we already talked about cube rules. You can see here we track changes in the dimensions used in the cube, the source cubes for it, the target cubes, processes that write to it, and the processes that read from it. So from a cube perspective, those are all the things. One of the more interesting areas of comparison is in change. In dimensions. So here you can see that we share an account dimension with the 2 models, which is a good way for us to kind of review all the areas where we track the changes in the dimensions. Here you can see we track the changes in the properties, the number of elements. We can look at the processes that update the dimension attributes themselves, which have been added and which have been omitted, elements that have been documented, and what additions there have been, dimension subsets, specifically subsets that have been modified with the baseline and the revised value, and changes to cubes that contain the dimension. So with all of this change data all cataloged for you, all this change data is all available in the search engine. You can see that you can very easily get to an audit scenario, whether it's an internal ITSM audit or it's an external audit for SOX or some other compliance regime. So for those of you who know QUBEdocs, you know there's more to the tool than what I've shown you, but I've made the promise that I'm going to move on and show you our brand new features. So with no further ado, I'm going to move on from QUBEdocs itself, the main documentation platform, and we're going to go back to the home page. And I'm going to show you our latest feature, log file search and analysis. So log file search and analysis is a new feature that we are really excited about. We've shown it to many customers. People have said things like, this is going to be game changing. Oh my God, I can't believe, I'm finally going to be able to actually use the log files. So the log file analysis feature is going to be launched this weekend, and it'll be available for all of our cloud users first thing on Monday morning, at least in the West Coast of the US and around the world as well. And for right now, I'm using kind of a test set of data. So I will get started with that. So the way you upload a log file, there's a little tutorial right here in the connection. So you upload a log file per connection. And here if you choose upload log files, it will tell you how to do that. And this little tutorial will walk you through it. You can run a process that will zip up your log file and prepare it to upload to us. And then you can upload it right here. I've uploaded one manually, so it's already in my system. Then you can analyze log files. It's literally just that simple. So right now what I'm doing is I'm kind of loading up the entire TM1 server log for a particular week in early March. And so here you can see I've come to my dashboard, and I can see all of the messaging info across a certain period. I can highlight and select and automatically refine my search a bit. I can see across all of my logging levels here that maybe I just want to look at the errors, and maybe I just want to look at the errors for this particular period of time. And maybe I'm only interested in the TI process errors. So here are just those log lines for TI processes across this dimension of time. Notice that we have a visual element up at the top, as well as we have the discrete details down here at the bottom. I can even drill into these log file items and see the raw detail, including the detail embedded in that particular log, the event itself, which would be the log content, and the message of this log as well. So we really can get down to a great level of detail very quickly just by using the key filters. So right away you can start to see that there's a lot of things that you might, questions you might have about what are my, how are my TI processes doing? How was the weekend? How did the weekend loads run? But let's get rid of these filters really quick, and let's try a different use case. So for instance, let's go ahead and reapply that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this data again, and we're taking a look at this week right here. And let's say, for instance, I didn't want to browse across my entire model, but one of the things that I did want to do is I wanted to be able to search. So let's say, for instance, I just wanted to see what changed. Just by typing in the word changed, you can see automatically my entire dashboard shows up, and I can see there have been changes across a couple of different periods, a couple of different days, and I can see my dimension changes there and who changed them. Maybe I'm just particularly interested in what Michael has been up to in the system. I can literally just type Michael's name in, and just by using the search I can see a whole list of items that Michael has been working on. I could also just drill into this content and look specifically just at the logins. And here I see a nice dashboard of when Michael was logging in. You can see he logged in all pretty much on one day. A few other interesting things I can do is I can type in, let's type in start time. Here I can see all the messages that include the word start and time, which is a nice search, and it gives me a pretty good idea of what's been going on around that concept of start and time. But specifically, I was really interested in just the TM1 server start time. So I could go ahead and combine that search term with a filter, and here you can see I've just produced a really nicely structured report around when the session started, how long it lasted, and what it visually looks like on the graph. So a very handy tool indeed. There's so many different things that you could search for when you think about it. I've got, for instance, maybe you just want to search for logins, who's been logging in, or maybe, excuse me, maybe you want to search for something related to feeders. Here you can see messages related to the feeders. Maybe you want information. I know we have a friend in Dusseldorf who may be interested in this information. He had asked us a question about it from a support perspective not too long ago. And so we can look at the server build, typing in build and just filtering on server. And here you can see all of the builds. So very useful tool. Now, the way we've structured TM1, the TM1 server activity log file analysis tool here, is that we have dashboards. And so we start you off on the TM1 server activity. If you drill down a level, you could take a look just at your TI process history, understanding the kind of the health and activity around your ETL process. So here you can see on the process history dashboard where you can look at all of the processes that we have and that have run. We get a good idea of the health of our ETL flow, and you can see we do have some aborted processes as well as some that have errored out. The measures that we have down here against each of these processes is extremely useful. For instance, we can take a look at this main load here. We can look at the longest running process that we have and understand it in relationship to its average execution time. We can look at our most used processes just by filtering on this particular heading. And here you can see I've got a consolidations control cube that gets used quite a bit. So very, very useful, very handy log file analysis. And we can do the same thing for chores. This dashboard is almost exactly the same as the search history, the process history. And then we have user activity logins. And so this is really just a specific dashboard for users. How many people have logged in? When have they logged in? I have some pretty boring data here because it's all kind of on the same day. But your data would probably look much more interesting. Who's been logging into the system and how often. And probably my second favorite, because I think TM1 server activity is my first favorite dashboard, but my second favorite dashboard is definitely the key metrics dashboard. So key metrics is really designed to give you kind of an at a glance, how's my server doing, how's my TM1 model doing. And so here you can see the number of server restarts over this time period. You can see the numbers of users that have logged in, the number of dimension changes, the number of chores executed and processes executed. These dashboards are highly configurable on the back end for us. We work with a lot of business partners around the world, and from time to time our business partners will have specific questions or requirements asking if we can modify our tool to suit their purposes. So you might imagine a consultant would like to have a dashboard to help manage their clients, and they would like a couple extra measures or KPIs over here on the left. And instead of seeing the raw log files, raw file entries over here on the right, maybe they'd like to see a time series chart or a volume chart. That's very easy for us to do. In fact, it's pretty simple for us to build one of these. We designed the system in a way that really allows us to customize log file analysis. We can turn on specific dashboards that we've created for specific users and for specific accounts. So We're quite excited about our new beta feature, and if you have any questions for us about this, we're happy to hear your questions and find out how you're using it. I'm going to switch over and show you one last thing here, which is if you want more information about log file analysis, one of the things that I want to orient you to is to just click on the question mark up here in the upper right-hand corner, and that will send you to our our support site, where we have information related to log file analysis and how it works, a little history of information, setup information. We have a little tutorial about how to upload your log files. If your account has been already set up to use log file analysis, which some of yours has been, you can do a quick workaround here if you want to take a look at it still this week, just by zipping up one of your log files here, and you can manually upload it. Some tutorials about working with log files, how to manage the search, and we'll put more information up here as time goes on. So I'm going to conclude my presentation part of the webinar here with just a quick conversation about API. So up until now, QUBEdocs has been really leveraging FTP in order to move content from your TM1 server to our cloud service. That was one of the ways that the planning analytics application supported, and we were able to use that functionality to both get content from documentation content from TM1 local, as well as planning analytics local, as well as planning analytics in the cloud. More recently, we've been focusing heavily on API interactions, and we can now create, from a connection standpoint, we can now create an API key so that you can schedule your TM1 chore to generate the documentation in your TM1 model, and the API key will then allow you access to our server to drop the file off, thus removing the need to set up an FTP schedule and a second task. And you can create the key right here in the connection settings. And we'll probably do a webinar just on a really short 15-minute webinar just on how to do that. So if anybody has questions about how to set up API interaction, please let me know. Send me a search note or an email. And with that, I will conclude the presentation portion of the webinar. Thanks everyone for attending, and if anyone has any questions, I haven't seen any come through the chat window, but I can take any questions now. Okay, thanks so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar, and thanks for being great QUBEdocs clients and customers and consultants, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.